This is the final webinar for New Sapiens, and this is our management team. So we have Bryant Cruse, William Bandy, William Readdy, and Tom Loveland. We'll just do some introductions, give you some background of our management team. We have some questions already curated, and then if we can get through those, which we probably will, then we will open it up to the floor. So please throw your questions in the Q&A chat, and if we're not able to answer them today, we'll definitely get back to them in a future video. Okay, so let's start with Tom Loveland. He is our Chief Administrative Officer, the founder of Mind Over Machines. So Tom, take it away.
Hi. So one of the things that I think, well, there you go. I just described myself not articulate off my feet. But anyway, I made a statement earlier today that I borrowed from somebody else that we don't have passions, passions have us. And that's the case with me and New Sapiens. When I ran across Bryant and what was going on 7, 8 years ago, it hit me very quickly that this was something significant, real, and very different. And I've just been all in ever since. Love it.
Absolutely. Next, we have William Readdy. He is our Chief Partnerships Officer. He is an astronaut, a fighter research pilot, and does a variety of other things. And we wanted to mention that he's not able to show his camera just because of the connectivity. But William is here. William, take it away.
Hi, I'm Bill Readdy. I've been a friend and colleague of Bryant since the late 80s, when the two of us were at the Naval Space Command working on, of all things, space stuff, computers, and Bryant at the time was working on early versions of AI. Matter of fact, while I was there, he was also working on a Lockheed contract, and he was working on ops and automating ops for the Hubble Space Telescope. So I had a chance to observe him then, and I have followed Bryant's career ever since as he started several companies. And when I heard about New Sapiens, and I knew his background. I mean, he was a Johnny. He went to Annapolis also, but Annapolis to the other school there, and they teach the classics. And I think his whole approach to everything I've known about him has been to deconstruct and then apply first principles to things. And I saw that he was using that with AI, and it made perfect sense to me. And the way he deconstructed and then recreated it. So I was an early investor, and I still am.
Thank you, William. Last but not least, we have William Bandy. He is a senior physicist of over 30 years, has over 100 patents, and is our Chief Intellectual Property Officer. So, William Bandy, please.
Yes, well, I was at DARPA in the mid-'80s and got to know the AI team there and the programs they were working on. And based on the hype at the time for AI said they were going to be able to achieve, I was a little surprised years later when I still couldn't tell my computer what I wanted it to do, have it understand what I was asking it to do, and go off and do it. I met Bryant probably about 13, 14 years ago through a mutual friend who thought I would be very interested in what Bryant was doing. And when Bryant described his approach to AI, I knew right then that Bryant was going to be the person making that happen. And I became his first investor. And I've been very much involved with it ever since, always excited about what is going on.
Beautiful, beautiful. And last but not least, the man himself, Bryant. If you can just give a 30-second introduction. I know you're going to be talking the entire time, but the background and maybe the initial stages of New Sapiens.
Well, I'll try to make it quick. In some ways, I never started out to solve the problem of artificial intelligence. I was, at the time that I first met Bill Readdy here, working as an engineer in Hubble, and I was trying to solve a real problem, which was trying to understand how to automate the analysis of telemetry. But my background, as Bill pointed out, back at St. John's College, I read the classics. I read what everybody had said about knowledge, what it was, its relationship to reality, and was been fascinated with the whole time. So it's been a strange pathway, putting practical engineering, rocket science, if you will, to try to operate complex vehicles by putting expertise into computers that were controlling them, pulling in basically very abstract philosophical considerations. But as it turned out, that was the only way you could solve this problem. You couldn't just solve it within computer science. So along the way, I've met some really, really intelligent and supportive people who caught the vision. And as I said, the vision has us, and we're very excited because we've created technology that works and that we see is going to change the world and be the kind of AI that we've always wanted. As Bill said, and I remember that this to this day, and when people say, what is New Sapiens about? I quote Bill Bandy, who said, AI is when machines have the comprehension to understand what we're saying to them and the intelligence to go off and do what we tell them. That's the kind of AI we're doing at New Sapiens. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you. Yeah, there are a lot of questions around the technology, around the company. So let's just get into them. So first of all, can you elaborate on the relative safety of synthetic intelligence compared to that of generative artificial intelligence?
Well, when I think people talk about safety and AI today, they're talking about the unwanted side effects or built-in features or limitations or problems with AI as it is today. Now, I'm not talking in terms of the AI, which is based on artificial neural networks, machine learning, and now generative AI. In terms of the unwanted side effects or the unwanted things, I'm talking about using statistical analysis based on machine learning algorithms to do things like attract people to their devices so that they'll see more ads. Of course, there's been Facebook had a documentary, Netflix had a documentary a year or two ago called The Social Dilemma about how these algorithms that Facebook had created and others to kind of draw people to spend more time on their devices was causing device addiction, rising rates of teenage suicide, and also engendering the kind of partisanship radicalism because people tend to click on things that either they really agree with or they really don't agree with. And so it kind of feeds people to go into a more extreme way of thinking. So that's a real serious problem with treating people like statistics that have come up with that type of AI. But also even more today in terms of what they now call generative AI, which is ChatGPT. We talk about bias. They say, well, it's bias. It says all these things that aren't true, or it comes out with toxic statements, offensive statements, or things that you really don't want it to be saying. And the other thing it does is they say that it hallucinates or make things up. All of that's terribly anthropomorphic. Generative AI and all of machine learning AI is really, it's just machines doing what computers do. It's computers doing what computers do, which is crunching numbers. And crunching numbers is good at statistics. And so when you say it's biased, it's only crunching the numbers. That is, it's finding, if you know how these things work, they are just predicting the statistical likelihood, given a word or a phrase, what would be another statistically likely word or phrase that could go along with that could be before it or after it, based on the training on a huge corpus of documents and texts and words written by humans for humans. So it's a really good parrot. And the more you train it on bigger and bigger data sets, the better it gets at parroting. But like parrots, it has no idea what the words mean. So if it comes out with bias, it's because it was in the database. And if it comes out one way, it's biased this way or that, it's because the majority of the people in the database have that bias. Now, keep in mind that some people's bias is another person's heartfelt truth, and so people get very, especially in these part of time, people get very upset by that. But it's not because the AI is biased. It's because it's not AI. It's just crunching numbers with statistics. But it's a problem. Also, in terms of saying toxic things, the people who put these models out there spend tons and tons of money having teams of human beings go through the data sets and try to pull out the toxic statements. There's a lot of bad things. They train these things on the internet. There's a lot of bad stuff on the internet. All that stuff has to be done manually. Now, as far as hallucinations, there's no hallucinations. It's just when it's putting a statistically likely sequence of words, there's no relationship necessarily. Statistically likely sequence of words doesn't mean it's a true statement. So they do pretty good at coming out with, valid information if it's something that's common knowledge or things that everybody would say. I talked to one of the better chatbots called Pi, very conversational, wanted to know what my hobbies were. I said, well, I like boating. And we started having this conversation about boating. And I quickly realized this is what anybody who didn't know anything about boating would say about it, or what it's just the lowest kind of common denominator. And it was really boring. I couldn't possibly learn anything new from it. Now, if you get more specific, it may give you a more specific answer, but the more specific the question, the more likely the answer is to be wrong. Tom here did a test on Bard, and he said, tell me about New Sapience. And it started off, the first paragraph was pretty good, but it was very familiar because clearly it was kind of paraphrasing stuff you'd find on our website or in podcasts or other things that we had written ourselves. And so we kind of agreed with that. It was pretty good. But the next paragraph, it started saying some, it's kind of confusing us with things that people say about chatbots and machine learning. It's confused. And the third paragraph, the longer it goes on, the more likelihood it deviates from reality. In the third paragraph, it explained to everybody that Bryant Cruse was a former Google engineer and that Peter Thiel and Elon Musk had invested $20 million in New Sapience. I'd like that reality, but it doesn't happen to be the one we're living in. So it's not hallucinating, it's just statistics. So these are what are called the dangers of machine learning. And well, there's another one I should address, very significant. It makes it real easy. ChatGPT makes it real easy to create 1 million bots to go out there and spread misinformation or whatever you want out on the internet. And so these things generate vast amounts of data. And it goes, and they're already starting to pollute the internet with various things. People have used these ChatGPT and others to create travel books, which they put on Amazon. And so there's, and not only travel books, but books about every topic. So there's now this huge flood of books out there, and they're crummy. They're not good books, and they're full of misinformation. And Amazon has had to take steps that you can't put more than 2 books up in one day. The other thing, of course, is they can be weapons of mass information by creating thousands of bots. So lots of societal harm from
Absolutely.
AI. Lots of societal. Now, what about synthetic intelligence? It doesn't have any of these problems. It doesn't make things up. It doesn't use statistics. The knowledge that it has is knowledge that initially it's a baseline model and knowledge of the world. It's knowledge that we carefully curate. Right now we're working on common knowledge. That's not particularly controversial. But when we get into more expert knowledge, we'll go to experts that are commonly acknowledged to be experts in their fields. And we will curate the best knowledge. So it'll have a very good foundation. Along with that, we're also working to give it a very great deal of what you call discernment about what other people say. And some of that's built in. It has a built-in, the very way it's architected, it's built in to avoid bias by the fact that a lot of bias really comes down to people's personal assessments or their, many cases, subjective assessments. Whenever you hear a pejorative term or you hear kind of an extreme statement or a negative statement about a group of people or a particular person, often it's reflects a person's personal assessment, which a lot of people, and most people probably don't agree with. That's bias. But in the case of sapiens, as you talk to them, they classify each concept you say. For instance, if I say that ChatGPT is a mindless statistical algorithm. And then I came back and asked the Sapiens, what is ChatGPT? Based on what I told it, it would say, it's a statistical algorithm. You think it's mindless. Why? Because mindless has a pejorative association with it. And so the concept associated with that word in its memory is tagged as a subjective assessment. So it attributes it to me. So you can say nasty things to your Sapiens all day long, and you can tell it that whatever group or this group or that group, and express all the biases you want. And say, okay. But it won't understand it's your opinion. It's not its opinion. So it's essentially safe in many, many ways. The other final thing about being safe is people worry that that machine learning approach to AI, if it gets more and more intelligent and we don't know how it works, could actually present it could become smarter than we are and eventually take over the world. Well, I don't see it getting any smarter. You know, you get better and better parrots, but I don't see that ChatGPT is any smarter than ChatGPT or GPT-3 or GPT-2, because they weren't smart either. They were just good at statistics. So that's kind of unfounded in the first place. But the other reason that people feel that they might be a danger is that stochastic algorithms, as I call them, they have built-in you can't, the programming that underneath of them cannot guarantee to return you the same results given the same inputs. So you don't really know what it's going to come out with. You really can't follow its reasoning because it's not really reasoning in that sense. So people are afraid that the superintelligence, that we don't understand how they work, especially if they got as smarter than we did, could be a danger. Well, our software Sapiens isn't based on that kind of stochastic processing. Our code is what we call deterministic. The Sapiens literally have to do what they're programmed to do. No matter how intelligent we make them, they still won't decide to change their programming and to do things that people are afraid super AIs will do. The other fallacy in thinking that AIs are going to take over the world is they are confusing AIs with human intelligence. The desire to change the world is built into humans' intelligence. It comes along, it evolves along with it. Intelligence, which is our ability to create models of the world so we can make better decisions and change the world we live in. That's the whole reason we evolved intelligence. That's, of course, it came along with the desire to use it to change things up. But it doesn't have to be. It's not part of intelligence. We're not creating sapiens with a built-in desire to use what they know to change the world on their own. So it's inherently safe. It has none of these undesirable side effects. It's inherently resistant to bias. It will have a great deal of discernment to be able to distinguish between what's common sense, common knowledge, scientific knowledge, personal beliefs, and bias. So
Great, great. So for the people that have just joined, maybe in the middle of the question, we are recording this and we will upload it to our YouTube channel. So just in case you joined while Bryant was talking, or maybe you can't make it for the entire duration, you will have access to the entire thing. And we'll do a social media blast as well. So Bryant, the next question is it possible that generative AI will be a huge flop and become a mere footnote in the history of science? Or is it inevitably a part of the acceleration and advancement of mankind?
another great question. So when I was working on Hubble, and that was trying to get human knowledge into the ground system, the tools we used were called expert systems or rule-based systems. And that was maybe the first great wave of AI. And it didn't really pan out. But at the time, it generated a lot of excitement and a lot of hype. People were thinking, this is it, this is great. We're going to have machines that understand what we say and do what we tell them. But it didn't scale. And I found it didn't scale. I was trying to use it at my first company. It wasn't until my second company we really got a handle on the problem. But the hype and the claims and the expectations engendered by, at the time, by the big tech companies of the day, they weren't the same we have now, and others, really left people with a bad taste in their mouth when it turned out that it didn't scale. and didn't really bring on the AI millennium that people were looking for. And we had a period of time called the AI winter, where you couldn't even say AI, and everybody was very disenchanted with it, and there was no funding for it. Well, that happened to the second great wave, which we're having today, which is really machine learning. That really became more or less identical with AI in about 2015 on, when we were already working on our stuff. But will it flop and have another AI winner? Or we won't have another AI winner, because here we are with something completely different already. But will it become just a footnote? Here is my take on that. And first of all, the jury is still out. There's something called the Gartner hype cycle that this marketing research firm Gartner has identified about new automation technology, particularly and specifically AI. So it starts out with this huge burst of what they call the peak of inflated expectations. That's kind of where we were in the first 2 months after ChatGPT was released. Everybody was like wild about it. This is great. This is going to change everything. But then it started to lose users, and people getting skeptical. All these other problems, hallucinations are coming out. And then the people who are promoting it saying, oh, that'll get fixed in future generations. Well, it's not clear. It's becoming clear it's not going to get fixed. It's inherent. So now we're going down that slide. And then you get to what they call the trough of disappointed expectations, or something like that, where people get really down on it. But then they still use it, and eventually there's this plateau of enlightenment, and then or the ramp of enlightenment. And finally, it levels off as people really find out what it's good for. And in terms of an automation technology, people find it'll do certain things. Well, a lot of times in terms of productivity and automation, it's never as good as, certainly never as good as people hope, but it might find its way. And in fact, that did happen to expert systems. Rule-based systems and using rules, symbolic AI as it's called, has found a place. It's still out there. It's used in business automation and some other areas. It still doesn't scale well, but when there's a really high payoff for automation. So it finally did find its way, but they don't call it AI anymore. My guess is that for generative AI, that it will find a place in generating images once they work out the rights of the fact that it's copying other people's art, things like that. I think it'll find a better place in there. I think as far as the generating text, I think it's going to end up being what a lot of people have kind of said from the beginning. It's kind of like autocomplete on steroids. I know people who use it who spend quite a bit of time doing it. They say, well, it's a good procrastinator's tool. For instance, if you're going to have to write a big document, maybe you can use it to kind of give you a boilerplate. Not very good, but maybe it's a starting point. Get you started. Same with code. Generate some interface code. Big code projects need to start with some kind of boilerplate that does the interface. You can use it to generate that code. It's not good. You have to fix it, but it gets you started. So I think it will find a place. And I think, kind of as a writer's tool or a writer's aid. I'm much more skeptical that it will ever be used for searching for information on the web. And one of the reasons I'm skeptical about that is I think that our technology will completely displace it for that purpose. Because we're building something that actually understands language. And if you wanted to go research on something on the web, tell it to go do that, and it'll go read the documents. Okay, with comprehension and understanding, and give you a synopsis. And eventually, if you wanted to write an essay about something, it'll be able to do that too. We will, and it'll be a good essay because we'll curate knowledge about, the elements of style, how to write a good paper, as well as how to research one, as well as how to have a great deal of discernment, research about the validity of the sources you're drawing it on. So it won't be useful for ChatGPT will go away. I do think whatever level it finds, it won't be called AI anymore, because what we're doing is going to be called AI because it is.
One of the things about the hype was what spurred the congressional hearings. So was the timing of the congressional hearings a detriment for New Sapiens? Did it have any impact? And is New Sapiens in support of government regulation of intelligence, synthetic or artificial?
Well, I think that the timing for the congressional hearings is all come about because of the reaction to ChatGPT, and which also brought attention to the other kind of abuses that people were already worrying about, like again, device addiction, misinformation on the internet, things like that. And it really kind of came to a head with ChatGPT. So, and at the same time, people like Sam Altman from OpenAI are saying, "Oh, we need regulation. We need regulation because of people can misuse these things." As though they created this immensely powerful genie, and we needed to worry about it. Well, the abuses are real, and the societal harm from that is real. So that's what engendered the hearings. It really is all about generative AI. It's really all about these language models and the kind of work that ChatGPT done, and only to a lesser extent, machine learning. I would have been a footnote about machine learning. Machine learning as a technique does a lot of really powerful things. What it does is find patterns in big sets of data. Now, the data may be pixel array of radiology imagery, or a pixel array that started out as an image from the James Webb Telescope, and applying statistical analysis to find features in that is a very powerful technique. It may be powerful finding patterns of vibrations in plasma waves in the containment field of a fusion reaction. Those are great applications. So it'll be around. But again, I don't think it'll be called AI because it's, again, computers doing what computers do well, crunching numbers and doing statistics. But the regulation there is using these technologies and using statistics to make decisions about affects people's lives. I never thought it was a good idea to make decisions that affect individual people's lives just based on statistics. But so there's a lot of abusive stuff. It really has nothing to do with New Sapiens, or the kind of AI we're building. I think in the end, the regulation is for a technology, and the concerns for technology that we don't intersect with in terms of the underlying features of it or the problems of it, as I said earlier. So we're kind of agnostic about that. I personally not a fan of having the government stick their oar in the water of a complicated and controversial topic when they don't really understand it very well. But that's not really what the question was. So no, I don't really think it impacts us one way or the other. There are real problems. I will say that.
So, in regards to Sapiens, can you discuss in more detail the thinking part? Does it think about things on its own? How does it know what to think about? Can it come up with imaginative new thoughts and ideas? Does it do just strict logical inference, or does it do nothing more than answer questions?
So the two parts of development that make Sapiens smart. Okay. Just like in the human mind, you make a distinction between how smart a person is in terms of their inherent ability to think and process information, and to result in humans to create knowledge, and the knowledge they have. If we say, let's pick on Albert Einstein as a person who had a really good, processor in there in terms of could think deep thoughts about difficult things and mathematics. If he was born a Cro-Magnon and didn't have the opportunity to learn about math and physics, he wouldn't be functionally, any more intelligent than the other folks. And in that environment, making a good arrowhead was probably a better skill. So in Sapiens 2, there is this dichotomy, this division between the knowledge of the world it has and its ability to apply intelligence to process that knowledge, which is to acquire more knowledge, to extend that knowledge, and to solve problems on the basis of that knowledge. And that involves intelligence in the sense of intelligence as thinking and information processing routines. And computers already have a good handle on that, in that they're great at. And what are those patterns? Logic you mentioned, reasoning, pattern matches, and data, memory, analysis, synthesis. All of those are things that are in the intelligence side. Now the Sapiens, and so we in our Sapiens have the knowledge structures that we curate directly, and then we have code that processes that structure. So that code is the intelligence part. Now, it turns out that if you have something to think about, if the knowledge of the world is contained in the structure, in a separate structure which is separate from the code, it's not in the code becomes much simpler and much more powerful. And so today, most of our code has to do with thinking about the model in the terms of extending it, making sure it's consistent, complete, and answering questions or acquiring more knowledge through understanding language. Now, language is not intelligence, and it's not knowledge, it's communications. But it requires quite a bit of processing in terms of analyzing the grammatical structure, looking up, searching for semantic connections between language patterns and words and non-symbolic structures in the model and the knowledge itself. A lot of code involved in them. Most of the code today, although you'd be amazed at how few lines of code are in the Sapiens today compared to what it can do from the standpoint of comprehension language. But in the end, that's only the beginning. As there's more and more knowledge, it becomes more and more practical to write some more and more background processing routines in terms of traversing that model to do analysis and synthesis. In other words, are there structures in the model that we can find commonality between wide-flung parts of the model and find a pattern that we didn't know was there, that the modelers didn't know was there, but in fact, you can write an algorithm to find those patterns and say, look, there's a pattern here. What does this mean? Well, that's what in humans we call creativity. So as it gets more and more knowledge, we will add background routines to do analysis, to do synthesis of ideas, to find things that come together to form a new idea. So eventually it'll be creative and intelligent in those ways and be able to find new ways to solve old problems. So we don't see any limitation at all for the amount of intelligence we can put in there, nor do we see any limitation at all in the amount of knowledge that we can put in there separate from its intelligence. So the two go together. But again, in terms of information processing, which is the intelligence, computers already have what it takes. But until you have the knowledge for them to think about, you don't write those kind of routines. Or at least they're not very powerful. You need knowledge to have functional intelligence. So as we build more and more knowledge and build more and more sophisticated structure, we'll build more and more intelligence to process that, both in the foreground and in the background. The foreground is where you have conversations and where you solve problems right now, and you analyze sensory data or other data coming into you. And the background is when you take that model, and in the background you traverse it, you look for inconsistencies, you look for places where it's incomplete, and you try to fill them in. And you look for new possibilities, new ideas, new patterns.
Is a companion connected to the web, and will it need access to a Wi-Fi or router?
When we do our first companion Sapiens as the first product, it will run natively on the iPhone. It will not be a connection to the web. You can talk to it and it can answer, and it will have all the knowledge it was born with, and in the model, at least in the early days. Don't drop in the water if you never connect to the internet. You'll need to back it up. It'll need an internet connection to back up. It'll need the internet connection to connect you with other people and other people's sapiens. It'll need an internet connection to go out and find things for you on the web, or to help you with your shopping and communications and all those other things. So it certainly is a web-enabled device, but it doesn't need the web to function. It's all contained on the local processor.
And is one companion connected to another, or can it be?
Well, by default, not necessarily. You'll control that. The person who has the sapien will control if they want to let it go out on the internet, if they want to let it to talk to other people, if they want to let it to connect to other sapiens. It'll be up to you to do that. But potentially, the greatest effect on society and the greatest effect on your life will benefit usually from allowing you sapiens to connect with other sapiens. So I think the way we see it unfolding, is that you will tell your sapiens, possibly to kind of like publish things about you that you want to publish out there to who? Your friends, to other sapiens, to your friends sapiens, or to any sapiens. And why would you ever do any sapiens? Because we see it may be things that say you're interested in, or what you would like more information about, or a question that you don't know how to find the answer to that you never found because no one has published the answer who might know it. By putting those out there on your sapiens, then we envision that sapiens will be able to put a broadcast out there, kind of like a traversal of the, not a web crawl, but a sapiens crawl, to find other people, other sapiens, to find the information you want, find the information you want to buy, the things you want to buy, to a degree that we never dreamed of now. Today you want to find an odd little thing, you might find it on eBay. And to an extent, I mean, the internet has revolutionized that, but that was only the internet as it exists today, the dumb internet, without intelligence, without knowledge. The internet is just about language, pictures, but not knowledge and not intelligence, is just a pale shadow of what it will become. We call it the internet of minds. The other thing about sapiens is that they can potentially, they don't have to use language for each other. So their bandwidth and communication bandwidth is infinite, not infinitely, but orders of magnitude faster than human-to-human communication, because they don't have to translate language into knowledge structures. They can take a whole structure. Now, there's interesting issues about what if these sapiens gives a whole structure, say, of knowledge about something that they got from their human, or they got from somebody else, and it sends it to another sapiens, and that has a knowledge in there, and the two have things that are inconsistent. How do you resolve that? Well, it's really not a problem, because everything is tagged by where it came from. Okay, so and it knows that people have different ideas. It knows that people don't always agree with lots of different things. But where they do agree, the more that people agree on, say, a given fact, the more reliable that information becomes. But sapiens don't have to resolve things. They keep it partitioned between the information that it was born with, that it had runtime, and everything it learned from its user, and everything it got from other sapiens, and everything it got from other people, and all that's partitioned. So you ask a question about, what's the best toothpaste, and it comes up with an answer. Well, 9 out of 10 dentists recommend Colgate, because that's what it found out they do. So it'll always give you a provenance of that. So it's some kind of a long answer. The answer is they don't have to be connected, but you will connect.
So what is stopping bad actors from developing sapiens for malevolent use?
Well, as we always said, in terms of just using a sapiens that is created by new sapiens for bad uses, there's a number of things that will make that difficult. First of all, it's not going to pick up your biases, and it's not going to pick up your prejudices, and it's not going to, go along with you in your conspiracy theories, and so it'll understand that you have them, and that's fine. But it has a built-in inhibition to help you do things, to help you do bad acting. And what that is that it's there to help you, support you in using and enjoying your person and property any way you want, with one with the major inhibition being that it won't help you violate somebody else's rights to their person and property. So as we build them, that we were building them on what we call the prime directives. Again, what's built into the Sapiens and its core programming, it cannot deviate from. So you can't make it, you can't browbeat it. It's not going to believe your conspiracy theories, and you can't browbeat it into going out there and doing something that's going to violate another person's rights. Now, on the other hand, stepping back, bigger picture, right now we have a patenting more things. We're going to keep some of the core things that enable and make our sapiens work as trade secrets. So, because we're trying to protect those prime directives. So we're very happy to license our technology and the core to anybody, so long as they're taking the package that has those built-in inhibitions in it. Well, once people understand, however, our approach, which is fundamentally different from any approach to AI hitherto, will other people eventually be able to come back and build their own Sapiens and maybe not put those prime directives that make them safe at that level in there? Yes. I can't say that that couldn't happen. Certainly it could happen. All powerful technologies ultimately can be used by human beings for good or bad purposes. Now, what's going to be the best defense if somebody creates AIs, sapiens, evil sapiens? Well, the best defense against an evil sapiens is a good sapiens. And we will have been way ahead of the market building good sapiens out there before any bad ones show up. So that's the answer to that question.
Fantastic. So last but not least, at least for this curated list, when do you expect the first product, assistant, or companion to be available?
Well, our current schedule, we've been actually working on the technology for over 15 years. The company's been up and running as New Sapiens and taking an investment for about 6 years now. We've made huge progress. We've passed the R&D phase. We're really into the production phase. We could get that first companion sapien, the consumer product. It might be ready to be released in as little as a year. Now that does depend on, we depend on our investors to keep the money flowing in. As you know, we're just wrapping up a reasonably successful. We're gratified the progress we've made on the Start Engine, and we're working for other sources of investment, and we'll continue to bring in investment. And if it comes in as we plan and hope, we could be releasing that product in as little as a year. And also we could be in a position to start our first commercial partnerships in possibly even soon, depending on reaching some technical milestones that we feel we're quite close to reaching. So not long. We're not talking
Fantastic.
about 5 years in the future or 10 years in the future. We're talking months, not years.
Fantastic. So this is the part of the webinar where people can start asking more questions. I see we have at least 2 or 3. So from Kranti, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, there are 3 questions here. First, what is the path to revenue?
Oh, well, the first path, 2 paths. We have essentially a B2B company and a B2C company, business to consumer. The business to consumer is basically product lines of Sapiens that people would buy on a subscription basis, not buy, but subscribe to, just like you would subscribe to, a music service or a magazine on a monthly basis. So that's one revenue surface. And of course, the market for that is huge. It's the total addressable market, even initially, is the number of computational devices out there that could host it, which will include, modern smartphones, of which there are billions already on the planet. So that would generate huge amounts of revenue. The other thing is on the business side. Again, product lines for basically any market vertical that you can think of. And again, any place where computers are used today to process data and information will almost in every case be enhanced by being able to them to have knowledge and think about things as well. So huge markets. We have a rather detailed plan on how we would penetrate those markets. The second part of this question, prove it in real life and scale. Well, we can prove it in the lab. We can't show it to you in a cell phone, but we're months or weeks away from being able to do that. What we can show people and have people who are willing to do a deep dive is we can show that the demos that we have today, which don't prove in terms of scalability and performance necessarily, although it already is fundamentally different than any kind of conversational AI that's ever been done before. Very different than chatbots already, and the user experience is very different because it reveals to you in terms of having a conversation that it is thinking about what you said and trying to understand you in a way that is very similar to the experience you have when you're talking to a human, maybe a young child who doesn't maybe understand everything you say and doesn't know a whole lot about the world, but it's still processing, thinking about, well, what does that word mean? And can I infer the meaning of that word? And did that make common sense? Is that something that's not consistent with common sense? It's already doing that. Now, that doesn't prove it'll scale on the time we say to the product we say, but we're very close to being able to do that.
So
And
I'll
so
just
proof is coming very shortly.
I'll group in Kranti's second question and the anonymous attendee's entire question. So who is New Sapiens looking to partner with to commercialize, and has New Sapiens partnered with Apple?
We haven't partnered with anybody yet. We are partnered with Apple. We will run on their phone as an Apple. We're using basically our Sapiens today, and the business model is that we provide the Sapiens and it runs on the users, the buyer's hardware. Now, in terms of individual things, the obvious way that you get the most utility out of a smart digital assistant that actually understands what you tell it and can ultimately do what you say, the place to put that is on a mobile device. And so we've targeted Apple as the first mobile device that we're supporting. The other, Android phones will come after. And eventually on computers, I mean, you could potentially run Sapiens on Apple computers. I have Sapiens running on my Apple computer right here, right now. Still running? It is. And shortly I'll be able to show it to you running. But so we didn't need to partner with the platform provider at this time. Would we partner with Apple? Maybe. I'll leave that to my chief partnerships officer when we get further on. What we do intend to do with Apple and the other big tech companies is license our technology to them, because obviously it impacts them greatly. And it's something that we feel our technology will be a must-have for them and all their business models. It will disrupt some of their business models, but they will adapt. They always do. For instance, Google makes most of its revenues off of people browsing for stuff on the internet and seeing ads. And when people can ask their Sapiens to go find something they want to buy, there will be no need to see that many ads. People still browse things on the internet, but more likely you send your Sapiens to scout out for what you're really interested in seeing, and you go directly to it. So it will disrupt them, but we certainly will not prevent them from licensing it. And what those licenses will look like? Will we license in the core technology? Or we would just give them a really good deal to license their tech? Obviously, for instance, the engine that runs Sapiens would make Siri smart. But then if you already have a Sapiens on your iPhone, what do you need Siri for, except to do the interfaces into the core phone software to manage the phone itself? And obviously we would need to partner for Apple for that.
Will it be available on Android?
Oh yes, certainly. In this country, Apple has the majority market, I think 60 or 65% in the US. Worldwide, Android phones are the majority. So of course we'll go where the market is. It's going to take quite a bit of code, because we wrote coding to do that, because we just rewrote our entire engine to run on the Apple hardware and be hardware native. But we'll have to do some stuff, some porting, but we'll support it as soon as we can.
How are you feeling, Brian? One or two more questions? Feeling good?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah? Okay. So Ben,
a lot of people hanging in here, so I'll hang in.
yeah. Great questions and great answers. So Ben gave us a very extensive list of fantastic questions. So let's go through a couple. Does a Sapiens recognize that it does not have the knowledge to answer a question?
Oh, sure. And sometimes not knowing you don't know is valuable, because ChatGPT doesn't know what it doesn't know. It doesn't think it knows everything until you say that's not right. It says, "Oh, sorry, man, mistake." It doesn't know. Sapiens know what it knows, and you ask it a question. What does it mean to know what it knows? You ask it a question, it processes that question and figures out what is being asked for. Okay, some knowledge that it has or doesn't have. So it looks into its model and sees it can find a reference that the words in the question correlate to. Now, some interesting subtleties there is we're working hard to define conversational tracking so that the sapiens kind of is working a hypothesis, has a working hypothesis all the time about why the person is asking the question or why they're even talking. And some of the things, well, it's talking because it's asking me a question because it wants to know if I know the answer. And there's subtleties in one case is because the person asking me the question to see if I know the answer because they don't know the answer and they want to know the answer and they want to see if I know it. But early on, you've got a lot of cases where the question is to see if I know the answer, to see how smart I am. And there again, you'll see some subtleties. For instance, as we're tagging all this knowledge we're putting in there, and we're tagging a lot of stuff as common knowledge, meaning knowledge that almost everybody knows about, like, what's a car and a tree and a cat and dog and all those things. It's common knowledge. So, if you're asking it, what's a cat? Since cat, if it doesn't know what a cat is, and that's it's common knowledge, it knows you're probably just testing to see if it knows what a cat, because everybody knows what a cat is. Yeah, anyway, what a cat is. So yes, I mean, it knows what it doesn't know because it knows what it doesn't, because it has knowledge. So by definition, yes.
So I guess we'll make this the last question to be respectful of everyone's time. Um, this is a particularly exciting question, and Bryant always makes me very happy when he answers this. What is your short-term and long-term vision beyond the first beta release?
Well, everybody for some time, we've always talked about human level AI, and everybody's really excited about it now. Of course, they got all spun up about it by ChatGPT, and even though there's no roadmap there, but still, what does it mean to have machines that are smart enough to understand what we say and intelligent enough to go do what we tell them? So we can imagine that in robots. Robots are not a stretch to imagine because people are already building the hardware and the software is falling behind, but we're going to provide the smarts for robots. So we've always had the notion of robots out there doing things for us, whether it's a self-driving car, or it's a humanoid robot driving a non-self-driving car, or it goes with a robot in the kitchen scrambling eggs, or something robot out in the yard. But think about that. So we've always known productivity, because where does that go? Well, you put these things into industrial robots. We thought about that, and so agricultural robots and manufacturing. So the next thing you know, you've got robots building other robots to build other robots who are building the machines to do mining and manufacturing infrastructure. What happens to productivity? Productivity is how many humans that you have to pay it takes to build something or provide a product or a service. When you have all these sapiens out there doing it, it becomes infinite. You don't need people to provide those things. So what happens then? Well, then at least the basic necessities of life become so cheap as to be virtually free or literally free. So that's a societal changing thing. That's going to take quite a bit of adjustment to our economy and everything else. But that's certainly, a rising tide of wealth, which solves a lot of problems right there. But that's really only the beginning of how I see the kind of AI that we're building changing the world. Another aspect is what it means to your personal life when you have a sapiens that is with you and remembering everything that you say to it, and it just exists to help you, and it's learning more and more about you. It becomes kind of your auxiliary memory. We envision, of course, that you would give your young children would get their first sapien, maybe in a furry toy or something, but that sapien will grow. Of course, we will make sapiens more and more intelligent and more knowledgeable with time, with core updates. But it's also learning more about you and the child, and becomes its playmate, its guardian, its babysitter, and then its tutor, and then its professor, and its colleague, advisor, companion, all the way through life. And just imagine how that would be, especially for old people, when you get to the very senior years and you lose a lot of friends and family. You have your sapiens your company, but you also have your friends and family sapiens, to remember them by. And down the generations, just imagine you could talk to your great grandmother sapien and say, what's life like that back in, the 21st century? It's kind of mind-boggling. But here's another aspect of it I'd like to consider in terms of that. It's about knowledge. So we're not just going to give sapiens common knowledge. We're starting with that because you need that to do language and understand language. But eventually to have expert knowledge about any field, all fields eventually. We have plans. We have plans to kind of build our own new Sapiens University as a way to get into the education market, but we'll curate expert knowledge, academic knowledge, scientific knowledge, history, everything. And so that you can download it to your Sapiens. Whether it'll all fit on your iPhone or not, I don't know. But by the time we get it all curated, probably will. But if not, it could go out there on the web and get it for you. So all the knowledge in the world is available to you. Now, how many of the world's problems, how many of our personal problems are really due to what we don't know? Misconceptions, misinformation, raw ignorance. Nobody has to be ignorant anymore. You can go and find things out that you need to know. I think that's going to be a huge change. I mean, how many of the world's problems are based on misinformation and ignorance? A lot. So you see a sea change just in behavior of individuals. Now, some people point out possible negative sides of that. Would we bother to learn anymore if we didn't have, would we even bother to go to school? It certainly impacts education. And it would impact it because today we go to education to learn facts or maybe a narrow skill that may not even be relevant. But in the future, when you have sapiens there, what is education? Well, we understand the new sapiens knowledge to be models of the world, and your model of the world that's in your head is your reality. That's the reality you live in. So education now becomes not so much filling your head with facts, but is my overall model, my overall grasp of the universe, both my intellectual grasp, but there's also, the sentient mind and our hearts. Is that complete and consistent? It's a different kind of education, but it's one which the existence and presence of sapiens will usher in. So yes, we will still need to educate ourselves, but just not with a bunch of facts that we soon forget. So that's a better way to be educated, and it's a better way to live. So that's another huge thing. Finally, consider this. Humans can only solve knowledge today, and knowledge is that model of the world by which we can go out and solve problems with the world. And some big problems are out there, like global warming, or asteroids coming to wipe us all out, and some really hard big problems that we have the answer to. How to build a faster than light spaceship would be a favorite of mine. So humans are very limited, and one mind at a time has knowledge. We try to put our heads together, but in order to do that, to solve bigger problems, we get together and talk and found research labs and universities, but sharing knowledge from mind to mind with language is very slow and problematic, or you never perfectly communicate an idea from one mind to another. Sapiens don't have that problem. Sapiens don't forget. And sapiens are not limited to the capacity of one processor at a time. I mean, nature, the human mind, the human brain as a processor, we're all more or less the same. And we're pretty smart, but not compared to imagine a sapiens mind running on a giant quantum computer that had all the knowledge that human beings in one mind that had ever come up with since the beginning of civilization, and able to handle vast quantities of data. It might figure out the warp drive in 10 minutes. I don't know. But again, what happens? What kind of civilization that we live in that case? Well, when we have that kind of productivity, when we have that kind of technology to build more technology, I think that we could create a society for ourselves that was, unlimited energy, that had no pollution, that was that was lacking in any kind of political oppression. People oppress people for for reasons that they have, but there's no good reason for it. It always tends to be because of misconceptions about things, or because there's not enough to go around of anything, of the basic necessities of life. Scattered ambitions, ignorance. I don't see those existing in the future. I see us humanity living in a very different place in 100 years from now than we have ever lived before. But I think it'll be a very human civilization, because it's, again, sapiens knowledge is curated from humans' minds, and they're being designed and programmed to support human needs, wants, and desires. And the first science that they will help us with is the science of human nature. So we know what kind of creatures we are, and what makes sense for us, and what kind of world we are designed to live in by nature. But how can we then take and create a society for ourselves that is consistent with what nature intended for us, but at the same time gives us the benefit of a technical civilization? I think that's eminently doable, but I think sapiens are a very key part of it. So that's a very optimistic view of the future, but I feel that it's perfectly reasonable based on what we've got today and what we're doing today. And I guess in closing, I'd like to thank all of you who have been investors in New Sapiens and help us make progress toward this vision and toward this dream. And will stay with us as we go forward, and help us reach it, help us get our technology into the market, and then to use it to solve the problems of the world.
We were just 5 minutes over the hour. I want to thank everybody for being here, especially the management team, taking time out of your busy schedules. It was great seeing you all. In terms of all of the attendees, we do have a new subreddit, Our New Sapiens. So please lodge your questions over there, start a conversation. We are also on Discord, Twitter or X, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, etc. And remember that this conversation is recorded and will be uploaded to our Twitter. And also our Start Engine campaign is ending October 2nd, so please invest soon. Thank you all so much for being here.
One final word for you guys. Ayush. Don't forget also newsapiens.com. We're about to redo the website, but you can also follow us there and get on our mailing and update list. So do follow us. I'd just like to thank Ayush. Ayush, you didn't introduce yourself. Ayush is our Director of Communications at New Sapiens, and he's been a full-time employee with us since last summer. He actually is the author of a book called AI for Generation Z. But now we're welcome to have Generation Z on board New Sapiens. And I thank you very much. I really appreciate you moderating this session, and many more to come.
Absolutely. It was a blast. Okay. Thank you, everyone.